Well, hello everyone. Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you guys are having a great day and a great week. Welcome to Midnight Hatter Live, the weekly variety show where we talk Gundam gaming and gang meetups.
Oh, good one.
There we go. I am, of course, your host, Steven, and joining me today, well, and as always,
Yeah.
is Gundam Explains Adam Blue. How you doing, man?
Yeah. Hey, doing good. Yeah, I'm after that meetup, which we'll get into. I feel like it kind of reinvigorated like this whole thing that we do. It's
Yeah.
like it was real. It was
It
real
was
for once.
tangible, this is a real person, I'm not being catfished or anything like that. Um, so,
That's
yeah,
pretty
no,
good.
that was great, and honestly, it's kind of going to inspire the conversation that I'd like to have today, and,
Cool.
it's gonna be sort of a mea culpa for me because I know a lot of people know where my stance is when it comes to the idea of community and interacting with other fans of properties and things like that,
Yeah.
that we all share an interest in. And, it's going to be a little opportunity for me to show off an old project that I started ages ago and where we're at with it now, because I think that we've taken a large leap forward. And I'm looking forward to sharing that with you.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
So, yeah, and if you guys, obviously, Adam released a video on Monday talking about our meetup in person
Oh
over the
yeah.
weekend. So, I'm sure that you guys have checked that out. It was a lot of fun. We
Yeah.
all got some sweet bounty. I, of course, have my stickers. My Gundamania shirt is in the wash. I actually wore it on the
Nice.
drive home from
Nice.
North Carolina. So, but yes, thank you, Adam, for that,
Oh yeah.
and thank you, Sway and Rogue New Type for meeting up with us. That was just a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
It was. It was definitely.
So yeah, with that said, I
Yeah.
do want to kind of hop into that topic, is because it's no secret that I am critical, so to speak, of online communities and shared interests and fandoms, and even to the degree that I just hate the words, right?
Yeah. No,
Eh,
and that's something that I never really thought of much until you would bring it up to me because that's one thing about being on YouTube and
yeah,
meeting people and using social media. It's like, man, I'm gonna get back into where there's these groups of people online, and sometimes it's based on communities, and they're willing to like out other people and block and like be toxic and all that. And you would bring that up in a way that's like, yeah, that is actually what the issue is. How can we navigate that? And
right,
it's just it always comes back to that analogy of when you're driving in a car. It's just because you're kind of anonymous in that car. You don't that other person you're seeing a car, not a person. And I feel like online it's like that too. But then once you meet people in person, like it's almost like this inner thing we all have as humans, the need to be a part of a tribe, but in a positive way. Just kind
definitely.
of out.
Yeah, I think it meeting the gang in person and hanging out at the hobby shop, which, Hangar 18 Hobby Shop. Thank you guys for hosting us. Yeah, impromptu hosts. They didn't realize that we were gonna be rolling as deep as we were,
Yeah.
but it kind of recontextualized my idea around what community can be and what fellowship can be, really,
Yeah.
which is, I think, a positive thing. And Simon Sinek talks about this a lot when it comes to interacting with people in other countries. For instance, if you're an American in Paris, France, even if you're from New York, if you bump into someone from North Carolina, all of a sudden you have a shared bond with that person, and you might have never talked to them if they were in the United States with you. But because you are both strangers in a strange land, so to speak, you're living
Yeah.
out your isekai in Paris. All of a sudden there's a bond there, and all of a sudden, well, hey, why don't we grab coffee together? You're in France, I'm in France. We have nothing in common aside from the fact that we are both not from this place.
Dude, that is a great analogy because it reminds me of when I was in high school and I would go get a job somewhere. And then I would see people at my job from school that I would never talk to. And then we become friends that way.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I
that's
think that
pretty good.
there's value in that. There's value in the in-person interpersonal connections that we have, and
Yeah.
it's one of the things that I think COVID definitely took away from a lot of us.
Yes.
And people are suffering mental fitness wise. They're suffering from the aftershocks of that. In fact, it's one of the things there used to be a game shop in my town that shut down because of COVID. So I'm
Ah,
glad that something like Hangar 18 exists still
yeah.
and is thriving in spite of those challenges. And so I guess what my thoughts are and my suggestion to people would be seek out those places and seek out that fellowship and that community in person, because we all have friends online, and obviously Adam and I are friends. We're even closer friends now that we've met in person,
Yeah.
but we were already friends from meeting online.
Mhm.
The world is not online, the world is outside.
Yeah.
So
Ah,
my suggestion is get out there, find your local hobby shop, and if there isn't one, if there isn't a community already built, one of the things that Hangar 18 was doing really well was fostering that community. They have these Sunday swap meets where people
yeah.
can come and trade Gunpla kits from their backlogs and things like that. And especially when you have a store like that, a small business that they want customers to come in and do those kinds of things. So if you just talk to the owners, and even if they don't sell Gunpla, if they're, mostly comic books or Funko Pops or whatever the case may be, just talk to them and say, "Hey, I want to host an event here." And they're probably going to be in it just because it's going to get more potential customers in the door. And so it helps everybody. So I think that it's just an awesome thing, and and so it gives me an even more profound respect for what Zeonic Shadow, shout
Yeah.
out in the chat, what Zeonic Shadow and the boys from Zeeg New York are doing, because
Yep.
they do these community build nights, because they are putting together an in-person community that is so much more valuable than anything that Adam and I do on Discord or on YouTube, you know, uh,
Yep.
in going back to the idea of what Simon Sinek talks about in terms of leadership and groups, is that group dynamics are not scalable to a certain point. It's there have been studies that show that you can't have one manager for more than about 150 employees. Otherwise, you start getting, these, cliques that start
Oh, yeah.
forming and things like that. And so the idea is that you always want to keep your groups small and manageable. And so it's nice to have, hey, awesome, we have like, 4,000 followers, but at the end of the day, you want those 4,000 followers to be segmented into like, you know, 40 groups of 100 people or so. Because, I mean, Adam, how many can you name 150 people that you have an intimate relationship with? Not just 150 names, because we can all dig into the
Yeah.
celebrity box and all that stuff, but like 150 people that personally, that you could call on the phone and they would take your call.
No, and, that's a good thing to bring up because there's times where I think about that, like, where I'll watch a movie where there's, like, a wedding, and then I think back to when I got married, I didn't have it was just a few of us hanging out, and then it makes me think, like, "Oh, man, these people have these weddings with all these people. Wow, is it that many people really care at that level of that person to join them in celebrating something like that?" And it's like, man, what is it that is it just because of my lifestyle that's kinda kept me from doing that, even though I like people and I like to make friends, I
Yeah,
love talking to people, but I think there's been, different things that have gone on in my life where I'm quick to judge maybe someone, be like, "I probably shouldn't be talking to them," when that's not the case, like, maybe what I'm seeing online or something from someone doesn't necessarily dictate who they are, but because we all kinda have these little ways of our personalities that don't translate online. So when then
very
you're
true.
you're talking to these people maybe in person or meeting them, it reminds me of when I would work in an office and there's this guy I met, his name is Phil. He constantly jokes, but if I saw his messages online, I would and that's the only way I talk to him, I would assume he's a jerk. But but in person, you can tell he's just like a sarcastic person, he likes to be funny, and, he was one of my best friends at this job I had previously, and so it and it's like I wanna be able to get more of that, and I feel like, as awesome as it's been meeting people through Gundam Explained, through your channel, on Discord, even talking on the phone with people, and people I would never not talk to before, to meet in person, there is that layer. It's almost like a physical, like the electrons are probably doing some interacting where we're
Yeah.
like sensing the joy and the wonder of meeting new people and excited to talk about something. It's like you can feel the excitement someone has when they have a take on something.
I'm sure that there's a pseudoscientific, maybe it's pheromones, maybe I don't know what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, you can take people who almost you could even say hate each other online, put them in a room together, and they'll find something to talk about. It maybe it's going to be harder if you've had a negative interaction with someone online to
Yeah.
get them in a room together and have them have that interaction. But the truth is, as much as I complain about other Gundam fans, I used to complain about other sports fans too. Like, my favorite soccer team is Arsenal, but I cannot stand other Arsenal fans.
Yeah, that's like
But
with the video games, like,
oh
when I was
yeah,
deep in the video game culture, it's like all those Sony fanboys, oh my
ugh,
god,
yeah,
but that's not really even a thing, we just make that up,
right. It's
you know?
it's amazing how quickly those barriers break down when you
Yeah,
when you separate yourself from the screen. And so,
yeah,
yes, Dan in chat put it best. We all need to touch grass.
yeah,
Some of us need to do more than that. Like, I don't know, go hug a tree or something.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's true.
but yeah, I cannot express, and not to get too sentimental, but I cannot express how valuable that experience last weekend, meeting up with the gang and shopping at a hobby shop was. It's
I
something
agree.
that I've been missing for a number of years, and so, like I said, I highly recommend that people do that in their local area and, get together with people. And then, like I said, if you don't know any Gundam fans in your area, be the guy that starts the community, be the guy that starts it,
Yeah,
because, if you have a meeting place, sometimes, like I said, it's going to be hard to find a dedicated meeting space, but there are plenty of small shops that would welcome any kind of group. So,
yeah, no, 100%. I I agree with you. Yeah, I don't know, I feel like I'm still, processing it, because it almost felt dreamlike in a way. Because I'm not doing these things often. And I
it's
did,
true.
it was buying a plane ticket, getting a hotel. Like I was jumping through hoops to make it happen, and it was worth it.
Yeah, agreed. I think that and there's almost a deliberate action to that too. There's I think we talked about, in terms of video games, like the level of investment that you put into something. So, like, for instance, if you buy a video game like me, you buy Tears of the Kingdom. I know a lot of people bought it and they're not going to finish it. I bought it and I finished it because I was like, I am going to get my money's worth. I'm going to
Yeah.
bleed my money's worth out of this game, even if I don't like it. But if I have a free game, if I download GBO2, I'm not hurt if I don't make my dailies for the day.
Oh, yeah,
It doesn't affect me that viscerally. And so
true.
when you separate the level of effort it takes to connect with a person and you say, "Hey, I could just log on Discord, fire off a message, and I know I'm going to get like 30 responses." Well, those responses are meaningless compared to I'm going to get in a car, get in a plane, I'm going to set up lodging for me and my family, and then I'm going to go out of my way to meet some people that I know we have a shared interest, we have a shared we all come from different backgrounds, we all have different, you know, faiths and political ideologies, whatever the case may be, but ultimately none of that stuff matters when you're in person chilling
Yeah,
at the shop and saying like, yeah, no, I'm not going to buy the high grade Nightingale. It's a little expensive. Or no, I think there was a Bound Dock, right? No,
yeah.
there was a Nightingale, wasn't
There
there?
was a
It was
Nightingale.
it was
There's
up
they
top.
even had the RE 100
Oh yeah,
Nightingale.
it's absolutely absurd.
Yeah,
So yeah, like I said, the more you put in, the more you're going to get out, and I think that
yeah,
there was that was proven past weekend.
yeah, definitely. I feel like I can go on and on with that. We might even touch on it a little bit tomorrow, but yeah,
Yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting about it some more, but I did want to
yeah,
get those thoughts off my chest,
yeah,
because I think that it's something that we're all missing.
yeah, no,
Now,
definitely.
Rogue in the chat is saying that they had a lot of good stuff, and I agree. They did have a lot of good
Yes.
stuff. I'm actually going to show off today what I picked up at Hangar 18, which is our
Mm,
full armor Gundam 7th. Um,
that is awesome. Yep,
first of all, you're never gonna beat, you know, hobby shop prices.
I
This
know.
kit on Amazon is probably twice as much, and which is one of the reasons that I never got it in the first place.
Yeah,
Um, Surprisingly, I was doing some research prior to the show, and it's got the Senki 0081 logo on it. So like obviously it is
from the game.
associated with the video game. But this was the only high grade that they came out with from that game. Like, you know,
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah,
uh,
it's, how that happens sometimes with the games, or they'll do, like, the Extreme Verse will have, like, the Extreme Gundam or something.
yeah, I mean, so there's no regular Gundam 7th. There's not even the G line series, like the standard light armor
Oh,
and assault
that's a good
armor.
call. Yeah.
You know, so it's just an interesting. And then several years later, obviously, the P Bandai Ifrit Noct came out. But those are the
Yeah.
only two kits that are exclusively from
Mm.
0081. Everything else is, yeah, you have Zaku's, you have GM commands, but those are generic suits that would have been in any, you
Yeah,
know,
and when I was there, I got the Cuckoo's Doan's Island gun cannon.
very
So,
nice.
I mean, I do think that's something that could be easily obtainable, but it's just I never saw it in person
Yeah.
anywhere, and I thought that was a pretty cool get. So,
I'm a little disappointed that the Kukuru's Doan's Island version of the gun cannon doesn't have like the same box art treatment that the Zaku and the Gundam did,
oh,
where
that's
it's like the
right. Yeah, it was
vertical
like the
aligned and it looks like a
special. Yeah,
movie
that's a good
box.
point. Interesting. I wonder if. Yeah, no, I don't know. It's almost like what they did with the Thunderbolt.
Hmm.
You know how Thunderbolt kinda had its own little unique, like, design around it?
Yeah, because they were supposed to look like the manga.
Ah,
So
okay.
yeah, actually, let me
That's
grab
right,
one of them.
yeah. Oh, having one at the ready.
Oh yeah.
Oh, man, and I just noticed how much more is on your, display back there.
Well, I was
That's
making
sick.
room on the desk so that we can
Oh,
take apart this Gundam 7th, and
okay.
I haven't finished building it, but I built a couple of parts just to show, kind of where I'm at with that project. But yeah, the
Yeah, I
Gundam
see.
Thunderbolt um, high
They did
grade
make it like
kits
that, yeah.
are supposed to look like the manga boxes, which I think is so awesome. I
Yeah,
love
no, that
when
is cool.
there's like a series tie-in like that, as opposed
It
to
would be
just the
cool.
generic HG UC
Yeah,
boxes.
it would be cool if they did that with the video game ones then, make it look like the video game cover, like, have a the
Yeah,
game logo or something, the PlayStation, I don't know,
I
something
think
funny
that'd be
like that.
cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, let me hop into my table view here because obviously there we go.
Oh,
So
there
yeah,
we go.
I did break out the old manual and build a couple of parts to this. Now the reason that this is an important pickup for me, and this has been a project several years in the making, is that uh, I started to 3D print a conversion kit for a high grade, just RX 78-2 Gundam to
Yeah.
convert it into the Gundam 7th. And so, I've got a couple of
Wow.
parts here, some pauldrons. We've got our shield. I printed out the beam rifle. Um, and then the idea was that, I would print out an entirely composite chest piece to replace the existing chest. Um, and, it's okay. It's not ideal.
Oh,
But
looks good.
that said, now that I know that the Gundam 7th can actually be affordably picked up from places,
Yeah.
it got me thinking, well, why don't I just take the full armor Gundam 7th that I wish could just be, standard armor and print the parts for that so that, it's a little easier to build. There's a little bit less to print, which means it's
Yeah.
cheaper. Which, if this is something that I was ever going to make available to people, which, spoiler alert, I'm trying to, uh, I want to make it as affordable as possible and easy as possible to swap these parts in and out.
Well, let me ask you real quick, lore-wise, what is the Gundam 7th? Is it a 7th, like, RX 78-7?
Yeah, basically. So,
Oh, okay, cool.
as you know, you got the RX 78-2, you've got the G3, which is the RX 78-3, the fourth Gundam, which, oh yeah, there's 4 and 5, which are from
Thoroughbred,
yeah, the thoroughbred.
yeah.
So those ones.
Ah,
Um, fifth one. I don't remember which, or no, so 4 and 5 were on the
Yeah, 4 and
thoroughbred.
5 and
6
6.
was the
Yeah, I don't know.
Mudrock from Xeonix Front.
Oh.
So, yeah,
Oh, okay, cool.
RX-78-6 was the Mudrock, and the 7th was from,
Ah,
0081. So, it
nice.
just, I love, and maybe this is probably a topic that you should put together on
Yeah,
Gundam Explained, because I
we
know
should.
your presentation format of putting things together in, like, a slide deck, if you were to count off the number of RX-78 variants, just the RX-78, not like going into like the Mark II, Mark III, all that
Right.
stuff. Oh man, there's
Yeah,
like,
that's a good idea. That actually is because that's just, like, kind of like a place to start if you're getting into Gundam and you like the RX-78.
oh yeah.
Um, yeah, that is cool.
So that said,
Yeah.
like I went ahead and built a couple of the parts that I had already 3D printed so that I could
Mm,
show off, just exactly where we're at as far as reducing the amount of things that need to be printed, and just the differences between the 3D model and the finished piece. So for one thing, the 3D model is very flat by comparison,
okay.
compared to like there's a steeper drop off from the front of the shield uh, on the actual kit than there is on this one. But
Yeah.
that's one less piece that needs to be printed out.
Yeah, interesting 'cause it seems more like interpretations rather than, like, something that's incorrect.
Yeah, yeah, and you and I have talked about that, especially with regard to, like, the aerials that you compared
Yeah.
the high grade aerial to the robot spirits. There's always those kind of little tweaks to the design
Yeah.
that I think, honestly, I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. I think that the 3D printed version of the beam rifle looks cooler than the actual beam rifle. It's slightly bigger. Um,
Yeah, that is interesting, yeah, it is a little longer, kinda
Now, of course, they have the articulated handle, which I
sure.
broke the handle off of mine.
Oh,
So that's unfortunate. But yeah, I mean, aside from that, I think that detail wise, they have slightly different details. There's like
yeah.
a sealed gas chamber on the top of this beam rifle versus this one's kind of got this notch in it. So yeah, like you said, different interpretations, different designs, different design choices.
Yeah, you could even, like, eventually make your ultimate version, where you take
Exactly.
what you feel is the best from 3D printing and all that, yeah, that's
And
pretty
I
neat.
think that that's going to be ultimately what we're going to have to do in order to achieve the final look that we're going
Ah,
for. Um, for one thing, well, we don't have to worry about the backpack. It looks like the backpack is going to be included on the kit, so
cool.
we don't have to do that. That honestly stressed me out a little bit, because the idea of printing just the chest piece to clip around the waist, that's relatively an easy ask. But then to have a backpack design that allows you to connect a backpack to it,
Yeah,
I probably would have opted for not the it's not the most recent version of the Gundam Mark II, but there is a version of the Gundam Mark II that, instead of just having like peg joints on the back to plug in, it actually has like a hook mechanism.
oh, I
So
like that.
yeah, and so it's just a much more secure fit, and I think especially with 3D printed parts and sort of the subtle variations that you end up having,
I wonder if that's
um,
the real grade. Is it the real grade Mark II that does that?
I think, yeah, I mean, you have the real grade Mark II, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's yeah, I forget, but yeah, I know what you mean, how sometimes, yeah, you plug it in, it's just a peg that could come off, but the hook is helpful. So,
Yeah,
another thing, it reminds me of that I think it was the Full Armor Double Zeta. Remember that you were working on? They had the magnets.
yeah.
Is that something you're thinking of incorporating in this?
I honestly hadn't thought of it, because I really hadn't even considered keeping the full armor components to the kit. Well, I was probably going to keep them for, like, some kit bashes or something like that. But that's actually a good point. Having
Mm.
an actual conversion that allows you to swap between the two
Or were you thinking of just, yeah, having 2, like, maybe buying another kit and then just making, yeah,
and have
2
that
that
be
you
the
got on
full
display?
armor, that might
Yeah.
be the way to go as well, honestly. There's we'll have to build it and see
Yeah,
what's missing, what we can salvage and what we can swap on. I think
yeah.
that, having the shoulder pauldrons magnetized and fitting over the existing pauldrons, that's probably not going to be too difficult to manage. But because the chest plate is a custom molded chest plate, that might be a little
That
difficult. So that with
okay.
that said, maybe it would be worthwhile to actually build the thing. At least building some of these parts that are going to need to be replaced so that we know what we're working with. Um,
And so far, does that seem like a certain era of high grade? Can you compare building it to, like, another one?
It definitely feels like an early high grade. I'm gonna be honest with
Okay.
you because there's so much empty space in the kit. I feel like with the origin era of high grades, like these newest high grades, you almost kind of have like an inner frame with
Yeah, that's
armor
right.
plates that can clip onto it.
Yeah. Okay, I
This
see.
is very is hollow the right term?
It's like shells, like you're putting connecting shells together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very strange phenomenon to be sure.
Yeah, it is interesting how different some of these builds are. Um, like I was telling you earlier, I built the Nightingale, the high grade Nightingale.
Are you allowed to say that yet?
Since I'm not making content technically, I'm really just talking to you about it.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, because Bandai sent that to me because GBO2 and all that. Yeah, there's even a video out right now for GBO2 of like the Nightingale stuff. But it building that high grade, I was really surprised how fun it was, how easy it was, considering it was so big. But
Yeah.
that's the thing; it was so big. There were all these big pieces that slapped together. But um, it and that's the one thing I love about building is then it makes me appreciate that mobile suit because then I understand, oh, the head versus the chest. Some of those Zeonic giant suits, it's like, what am I looking at? And
Oh,
and
yeah.
I kind of get a better understanding of actually what I'm putting together, what I'm building. Then I'm like, especially with this Nightingale, it's like, that's like a Sazabi, that's like the Cublé, oh, that part is like the O, and it's like, wow, I'm seeing where the design inspirations led, whether that was intentional or not, but it led to that, design. Because yeah, the
Well,
Nightingale apparently was the Sazabi,
yes.
and then they made, for the animation Sharks Counterattack, they made up some new mobile suits. So I find that interesting.
Yeah. Well, and given the content that you create around the lore behind these suits and, where the production line comes from and things like that, it I can see how that plays into your interest of those kits where it's like,
Yeah,
you can when you have something a little more tangible, it's different than just looking at art online.
yeah,
You can
and
actually kind of inspect it. It's
yeah, exactly. Because there's something that I think some humans tend to do, and I tend to do it. I know I do it a lot with like Star Wars or like even like the aliens or predators. I look at how things are designed. I'm like, okay, well, what led to how this was designed, both in the universe and out? Who was the creator?
yeah.
It reminds me a lot of music because I'm really into music, like metal, and I'm like, this is a good metal album. What did they listen to come to this conclusion? And then where did that come from? I finally got to the point where like Motorhead was one of the first bands to kind of do the fast kind of blast beats that then punk and metal pretty much just started incorporating since then. And that's kind of like my favorite aspect of metal. And yeah, so it's funny. I see that stuff like with music. And then so when I'm looking at these mobile suit designs, so I guess I wonder if it's where I am just fascinated with at the end of the day, it's art and what was that inspiration to create that? Not that I do anything with that information. It's
No,
just
for sure.
I
A lot of
generally
it's kind of just
interested.
trivia.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah.
recently saw an interview with Dave Grohl where he was talking about how when he was drumming for Nirvana, a
Yeah.
lot of the beats he was using were recycled disco beats.
Oh, interesting.
And I think he like met one of his idols, one of these guys that was drumming for a disco band in the '70s, He was like, "Oh man, like I owe my entire career to you. I've been stealing your beats for, a decade." And the guy was
Wow.
like, yeah, I know."
Oh. Yeah,
I think it's a
that's
lot
it's
harder to get away with on drums than it is, with a guitar or a bass.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's true, but, and then that makes me think, like, it could be with music. I've gone back really far where it's like a lot of stuff came from blues. A lot of the stuff that I like in metal came from blues or
Yep.
polka, because polka has the faster drumming and it's combining those elements. Um, and a lot of times where, like, hip hop beats came from the, what do you call it? The not the breakdown. Is that what it's called? Where later on in a song, older songs, there would be, like, the breakdown,
Yeah.
and then they would take that and make a whole song out of it. And so it's like with a mobile suit design, okay, super robot. Well, where did that come from? Where did they get the inspiration for super robot? Was it I mean, there's then, some of the Talos is telling me a lot of the old, Greek mythology talks about robots, automatons
True.
that existed before, like that. So that's been a thought for a long time, and
Yeah.
so it's interesting to think, where that came from. Um,
Yeah, and you brought up in terms of like mythology and connecting that to the super robot genre, you can see the sort of influences even just in Gundam, but in all mecha designs, where like maybe a helmet shape has like a slightly Roman crest to it. You
oh
know,
yeah,
the and we obviously, the how do I phrase this? The stereotypical, the most obvious one is like, oh yeah, Xeon suits are all, inspired
oh,
by
by Nazis or
late
World War II.
late
Yeah,
1930s German style, maybe
yeah,
Hugo Boss, I don't know. But no, I mean, I think that there's even more beyond that. I think that
yeah,
if you kind of dig into some of the aesthetics of it, you know, the spiked shoulder pauldrons. What's the sort
yeah.
of, I don't even know what is the aesthetic root of that? In language we would call it like, oh, what's the etymology of that word? But like, what is the etymology of that design kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah, because the spikes, and it could just be where the spike was more associated with the bad guy. So that's why something like that would be used. Who knows? But yeah, that's and Dan Vince is saying Austrian painters. So I'm not familiar if maybe
Oh
Austrian painters came
yeah,
up
there's
with
there's
some.
probably there's probably a little bit of influence there with Xeon mechanics as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and then the whole thing when it comes to the sort of humanoid style robot, and then the more Western preference where it looks just like a tank that they sort of put more like functional like legs and arms that are built more in. And I don't even know where that stuff came from. I'd really like to try to figure that out where sort of, yeah, the Western mecha design and even a lot of Japanese mecha design too it kind of strays from the super robot, and it's more about like a more practical look, like some not Robotech, but where
Like BattleTech.
BattleTech, yeah, there you go, where
Yeah.
that kind of design element came from, where it's like, well, if it was really a giant robot, it wouldn't be totally humanoid. There would be some elements, And what is
Yeah.
that the thought then? I don't know.
Well, that cracks me up, the explanation for that in the Metal Gear Solid video games, because, you know, obviously it was just cool to have giant walking metal robots as the bad guys in the game. But when you get to Metal Gear Solid 3 and they're designing the Shagohod, the tank, and Snake is talking to this scientist, and the scientist is saying like, what's going to revolutionize weapons technology? He starts patting his legs and he's like, legs, you can walk on things. And it's like, oh, you kind of see this progression of, okay, so we're going to build a super tank, but the tank can't go up mountains, so we're gonna put legs on a tank. And it's like, well, if you're gonna put legs on a tank, you might as well put arms on a tank. So it's like you kind
Mm,
of,
that's funny that they said that in there. Because yeah, you kinda think about it that way. It's like, does that make sense? Do we get what hydraulics or some sort of, like, I guess they say metal coating in Gundam where it makes a little more sense for, like, how it would move, because there's going to be this degree of losing function the
Yep.
bigger it gets and the more power it requires. And
Um,
then it depends how the power's used. Like if we find out a way to use some sort of like quantum power,
right.
I don't.
Yeah. Fusion reactions, things like that. Well,
Oh, and then
and oh, go
J
ahead.
JMKL X saying chicken walkers in Star Wars probably, um, that's a good way to, because thinking back, I never considered that stuff in Star Wars mechs, but that's what that is,
True.
and I've never thought about that. Yeah, kinda George Lucas in a way did kind of revolutionize the more mechanical functioning looking uh, mech design. Not that he did it himself, but through his stories. And then
Sure.
the mobile suit sensibilities was influenced by power suits from Starship Troopers, which that makes sense. Robert Heinlein, I think 60s, wrote Starship Troopers, and there was the idea of a power suit, which back then probably would look different, but interpreted in an anime in the 80s, which Starship Troopers was, they made a cool looking suit someone went in. So I like that
Yeah.
train of thought. It's someone writing an idea, but not necessarily knowing the details of how it looks, and then being interpreted down generations where there's more technology to kind of help give us the idea.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because there was an interview I was watching recently where they were talking about the pod racers in episode 1 of Star Wars, and the guy that made the models, he was like, "Oh, I took some jet engines from like a model airplane and like I
Oh, yeah.
attached them by cables and stuff like that." And he goes to George Lucas, and George Lucas immediately is like, "This is how it works. There's going to be an electric cable that connects
Yeah.
these two engines together, and these flaps are going to open, and the whole thing goes forward." And it's like, he just was making a model that looked cool. He wasn't really thinking about the lore of it and why it works and how it works. And then all it takes is that interpretation, that spark of imagination that says,
Yeah.
"Here's how it, here's how it's
That's
going."
that's the fun part. That's the collaboration. There's someone with an idea or a concept in terms of making something look a certain way. Then there's someone explaining how that could look that way, so then they can further iterate on that design. I think that's a really cool way, things are made. And I've been having trouble with that. Like lately, I've been writing more, and when I'm done, I'm just like, "What? This is nothing. This is uh, I don't know." Like, and I feel like it's because maybe when I write, I really should be collaborating. I wonder if I am collaborating, I'm gonna get ideas from someone based on my ideas that are gonna motivate me or inspire me to further complete whatever I'm completing. Yeah, because 'cause I'll write something that's my idea, and I'm like, "Man, this was just my idea. Is that really cool? I don't know."
Yeah,
Um,
I think when you present an idea to another person and they start kind of running with it and saying like, "Oh my goodness, like yeah, that's I can imagine this and how this would interact." That's how you know it's a good idea, when you can get other people to start putting their own
yeah,
spin on it.
that's why I think the Gareth Edwards Godzilla is so awesome, because they took that idea of Godzilla and how, due to the special effects, it had to be sort of campy and cheesy,
Yeah,
and then you get modern Hollywood filmmaking, and it's like, "Oh, let's kind of add that level of realism," which I still think that movie does great compared to most Hollywood movies when it's trying to interpret something.
sure.
Even though a lot of people thought it was kinda slow with the characters, but I feel like in a Godzilla movie, you need to have interesting characters because what else is it gonna be?
I was gonna say, do you? Or do you just need Godzilla knocking down
Well,
buildings?
you know what? Okay, like, let's say they made the Godzilla movie an hour
Okay,
of him just knocking down buildings, then that might be fun. But,
sure.
like, if you're gonna make a full-length feature film, you're gonna get bored of Godzilla. Like, I think Shin Godzilla did it best.
Okay,
Godzilla went through transformations, and while that was happening, you had, like, the bureaucracy of a government trying to counter the fact that a giant monster invaded. Like, and so there's that drama. Um yeah, I think, it more and more it's in and I'm wanting your take on this. It's like when I'm writing my stories, I'm figuring, you know what, the character drama needs to be interesting in order to carry it. They always say characters need to be interesting, but then I'm writing the characters in a way like, would an actor find this interesting to act out? Or would an actor find this cringy to act out? And so then that kinda dictates how I'm writing the characters. Like, I feel like an actor would be more interested if there's roller coasters of emotions for a character, And then it makes me think of then like 80s action stars like Arnold Schwarzenegger, where it's more straight up action,
Mhm.
but it's that delivery of like badass humor that, it's like it's not like full comedy, but it's kinda like the badassness
Yeah, you
that
have to have a little one-liner before you,
yeah, yeah,
kick a
take out
guy
a guy,
into
like,
a
kick around,
volcano,
maybe throw a
like
knife at them on the wall.
right.
Um,
Um,
so, yeah, it's making me wonder how I need to write, yeah, and I guess that's what's happening. I'm writing my stories because I have an idea, and then I'm bored of it, and then I feel like I'm having to make up stuff just to fill in time, and I'm like, "Okay, then I'm approaching this wrong. I need to figure out what it is, uh,
mm.
that I wanna spend time writing, like, 80, 90 pages." Um
Yeah, and I mean, if you're having a hard time writing it, then just imagine how hard it would be to read it, right? Like,
Yes.
that's
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The and I gotta say the thing I've been most proud of writing had to do with in my head, the characters were Jackie Chan and Bruce Campbell, and they were just going back and forth, arguing and quipping and while they were fighting demons. And I think that it worked because it's like I wasn't making that up. I was taking something that already works and just combining it, which is
yeah.
Bruce Campbell and Jackie Chan.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because that is kind of one of the better tabletop podcasts out there, Glass Cannon. One of the things that they do when they're describing their characters is they associate it with like a celebrity or a fictional character or something like that. So
That's a
it's
good
like,
idea.
they're sitting there and saying like, "Oh, I'm playing a level 12 barbarian that happens to be played by Betty White." And it's like, okay, so now you can kind of fill in the blanks and you kind of use that existing archetype as like a as
Oh, yeah.
shorthand for what type of character you're trying to convey.
Yeah, because if I'm making up a character, I can that's why I think casting is kind of fun because sometimes you could try to find what the character is. You have a basis of like maybe their struggles and how they speak, but then it's like, okay, let's find an actor that could create or embody what this is, and I think y that that's a good way to go about it, but when I'm writing, I can't do that. When I'm writing, I have to or if someone's reading something, it's almost like, what is something they can base it on, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, oh, yeah, Jam Kill X, not Jackie Chan and John Cena. I joke because they got a movie just on Netflix. Yeah, I started it, and it's
Oh, did you?
actually not bad, but then I think I went to sleep. I moved on. But it wasn't bad. I just don't think it was doing anything new. John Cena was doing good. Jackie Chan was doing good. It's
Yeah.
it's one of those things where when it's just like some basic military thing nowadays, it's like that's the story they're in.
Mhm.
And that's why when like one of the stories I'm writing, it's like, let's take like those old games, shmups like R-Type and Gradius, and what if that was a movie? Where there's weird random creatures attacking Earth, and there has to be, like, pilots in badass spaceships that have to go fight them,
So
and
like
it's like,
Last
"Well, that's cool."
Starfighter?
Huh?
So like the Last Starfighter?
Kind of. Yeah, that one didn't do it for
It
me,
was a
but
little cheesy, and I
yeah.
think that it's funny that they're kinda doing that again with the Gran Turismo movie, where it's like,
Oh, yeah,
"Huh,
that's right.
the kid's
Yeah.
playing a video game. Oh, what's this video game ever gonna do for you?" "Well, we just need him to go race cars now." Like, what?
Yeah.
It's
But
preposterous.
then it's like, well, the setting, that's interesting. So that setting is, yeah, someone playing a game that then gets them that. But what if, sometimes I think, is it like, I was thinking like taking music like black metal music, making
Sure.
that a theme to introduce the space setting. But anyway, yeah,
Okay.
where you at? Where you
Well,
at?
no, I d not no, I'm not trying to derail you at
No,
all.
no,
I've
I could
reached
talk
a
all day.
point where I think we can see where we're at as far as the chest build goes. And you know what? With my fancy new boom arm, I can actually
Oh,
get a
that
little
is fancy.
closer in and not have to do this whole, hey, focus on this kind of game.
Yeah.
Um, so obviously the 3D printed chest piece, there's a lot more going on than what we got in the existing one. We're gonna have to 3D print new vents because the vents are not present on the high grade kit. Whoa. Um, Yeah, I mean, honestly, it looks like we might have to just 3D print the entire chest,
Hmm.
which is unfortunate, but not wholly unexpected.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that ultimately it's going to come down to just printing the pauldrons and the, chest and back piece. But
Yeah.
everything else seems to be okay. And
Oh,
one of
that's
the things
cool.
that I'm particularly excited about is the fact that this seems a little larger than the high grade um, RX-78 too, which you know, not a huge deal breaker, but
And wait, is that RX-78 too? It looks like you painted it to look like it's from animation.
I did,
That
yes.
looks good.
Uh, you are being very kind, but no, this was a pretty poor paint job that I had done prior. It was prior to my understanding of how light works.
Oh, okay.
But one of the things that I thought was pretty neat was just creating those block shadows and getting that
Yeah.
sort of cell shaded look to them,
Yeah,
adding the
close up, I could see it a lot better. Yeah, that is pretty neat.
thank you.
Huh.
I could never get the white part down, and so I was like, I'm just gonna re- upcycle this kit, so to speak.
No, that and which one is that? That RX-78 too? Is that standard high
So,
grade?
funny story, this actually came from the set that comes with the G Fighter.
Oh,
And the
oh,
reason I
okay.
got it was because I wanted the G Fighter for a project that I was working on with, um, you know, another kit bash. And so I was like, well, I've got this spare RX-78 too that I can, butcher and do some fun things with. So I decided to
That's
try
cool.
my hand at the cell shaded finish, but could never get it down right.
Yeah, the head is pretty cool on that. I don't know if it's because of the paint detail, but it seems to have
Yeah, I mean, I think that having those extra lines kind of helps with, they're
well, even the
basically just
red.
panel
Like,
lines.
the amount of red it has between the eye and the white mouthpiece, you don't see that a lot.
That's true. I think that this is
That's
one of
kind of
those
like an
rare.
OG design.
Oh, apparently I just broke the V fin. I didn't realize that it was glued in there.
Okay.
But that's okay. Like I said, we will still upcycle this kit and do something fun with it.
Oh,
But
yeah, Rogue is saying it's a 2001 high grade.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, most of the high grades I have are from, the earliest generation of high grades.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, I think that like I said, I've got a plan in place now that we can start working on this. And once I finish this kit, I'll know exactly how to fit these parts together. So that'll be
Yeah.
where we go.
No, that's looking good.
Thank
Looking
you, thank
good.
you. Yeah, so that's going to be one of the things that I'm working on. Obviously, I've still got the high mobility Zaku that I've been working towards getting finished. I just bought a new jug of resin so I can start
Oh,
printing things again.
what about
Um,
that, diorama?
Diorama's still coming along.
Wow.
Got my chunkies, and I'm
Yeah.
ready to start putting them into place. I haven't picked up any XPS foam though. XPS foam is like it's funny because you know maybe like 5 years ago when I started doing kind of miniature hobbies and D&D and that sort of thing, and making dioramas. The idea of using XPS foam, like the insulation foam that you can get from Home Depot or Lowe's, was this new thing. Like all of the YouTubers were talking about it. Like, hey, use this as a craft material. It's perfect. You can carve it up. You can do all these fun things with it. And now it's like just standard fare. People like
Oh,
Boylai Hobby Time. He'll just be like, oh, yep, we're gonna get out some foam and cut it into things, and it's like you know, 5 years ago, people would have been saying like, "What foam is he talking about? How is he using
interesting.
this stuff?" So it's interesting how these sort of hobbies evolve over time.
But is it sold in hobby stores, or is it strictly just still a you go to Lowe's and Home Depot for installation?
Still just an
Oh,
insulation thing, so it's just like one of those niche thing. Honestly, if I were a hobby shop, I would probably buy the big sheets of insulation, cut them up into smaller,
yeah.
portions, and then sell those. But
You know,
don't steal my
speaking
ideas.
no, speaking of that, so I've been watching a lot of these hobbyists of how they're storing their creations.
Mm,
And I have this shelf over here that I wish was a cabinet, like, I can open, and I found where you can get some acrylic paneling cut, and it would cost me under $100 to get a 7-foot by 3-foot thing, and I see in the videos where they put magnet lining around it, so then they can I'm like, "Wow, I'm gonna
go.
try to start doing that," to kinda keep dust off of it or whatever, or keep the dog away. But I think that's another cool element when it comes to the hobby of like custom and building your own things that you're still in the ballpark of then custom building your own ways of storing them and displaying them.
It's true, and,
Yeah.
we've talked about it before, the way that you're almost with every new thing that you try out, with every new technique or new tool that you use, you're kind of expanding not just what you're doing in the individual hobby that you're working on, but also, it kind of trickles down and works on a lot of things. For one thing, um, it's driving me nuts the fact that my daughter's penguin toy does not sync with the other toys that it's supposed to. I think there's something wrong with like the motor in that's supposed to make it dance, and so like it makes this whirring noise and like doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So I'm like, well, you know what? I'm just gonna take it apart, and I know a thing or two about wiring now, so I'm gonna see if I can fix it. It's so fascinating just the things that you learn over time. I
Yeah.
had this old guitar pedal that someone gave to me, but they didn't have the power supply for it, and it doesn't take batteries. So I've got this device that I have nothing, I can't do anything with. And I used to go around to all like the guitar centers and Sam Ash. I'm like, do you have a power cable for this? Like, what kind of power adapter do I
Oh.
use? None of them knew what they were talking about because they're musicians. They don't know what they're talking
Oh, yeah.
about.
Yeah.
But now, having worked with electronics, worked with LEDs and EL wires and things like that, I'm like, oh, I just need to get the right voltage charger. In fact, that adjustable voltage charger that I've been using for my hobby stuff has the 8-volt setting that I need for that device. And so like now I'm like, well,
That's
maybe I'm
awesome.
gonna plug my guitar in tonight and and see what
Yeah.
this thing can do.
No, that's a good point. Like with the lately with my desk setup, I've been trying to manage the cables and hide them. And then when I was done with that, I looked at my detail shelf that I have the lights and I have cables down. I'm like, wait a minute. I could totally hide those cables. So then I used the same techniques and I made it where now you can't see any of the wiring or the cables. I'm
And it's
actually
just
gonna do a
like that.
video on that because I learned no, I learned so much of how to make my detail look it itself look good, not just what's in there. So
Right.
I'll probably do a video on that.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, yeah, I'm hoping that I'll obviously do the same thing that I always do. I'll record all of the steps of my progress with this kit and
Yeah.
the conversion. I think honestly this is going to be a little bit easier to do than the Zaku, so maybe this will be ready by
Oh, that's cool.
September, as opposed to the Zaku, which I've been working on for God knows how long.
Yeah. I know it's been a while, but that one seems there's a lot to it. So
Yeah, that one's right around the corner as well. And now that I've kind of dialed in the resin that I've used, and this is one of the things that I mentioned on the Patreon is I had been using this budget resin. I've been kind of experimenting with different types of 3D print resin, and I found that there's trade-offs to everything, right? So with some of the translucent resins, I get these issues of like bubbling up, especially around contact points of the supports. So what's happening is, as the supports are printing, the light is actually overexposing because of the translucent resin, and so it's like creating this kind of bubbled effect on the connection points. Just means that there's a lot of extra cleanup that has to be done. Um, but it kind of sucks.
yeah.
One of the other things is like alcohol wash resin versus water washable resin. Water washable resin's a lot more fun to work with because you don't have to deal with,
Mm,
isopropyl alcohol and all of this stuff. You can just use tap water to wash your prints, but it takes a lot longer to cure. And that's one of the things that I mentioned
uh,
on Patreon is that, you know, when you're using a resin printer and you're doing water washable resin, you're going to do like 8 seconds per layer when typical resin's like between 4 to 6 seconds per layer.
oh,
And
like
so it's
doubling
possible
it.
to lose a lot of
Yeah.
detail because you're overexposing you're
Mm,
overexposing the resin to the UV light. The flip side of that is that then it becomes harder to gauge when something is going to fit with an existing piece. So, say for instance, with the action bases that I was printing,
Yeah.
the 3D model is exactly 7 millimeters because that's exactly the size of the peg that comes with the action base that plugs in. Problem is when the print is exposed, it's not quite 7 millimeters anymore. It's like 6.89. So
Mm,
then
wow.
I'm having to go back and like drill a bigger hole. So one of the things that I'm doing now is working with a single brand and a single type of resin so that I know exactly what type of shrinkage I'm going to deal with, and I can account for that in the model and say,
Yeah.
you know, so
Wow. So many steps to it.
yeah, it's fun, but
Yeah, it's fun.
I'm spending the money and I'm doing the hard work so that you guys don't have to. I
Yeah,
can
of course. There
I
you
can
go.
share with you my failure so that you can learn from it. And that's part of the fun of doing all of this is that,
Yeah.
and it's one of the reasons that I enjoy doing it live too, as opposed to just recording videos and always showing the best cuts. I'm like, I'm going to show the fact that I screwed up.
Yeah, I know if you were to plan like that Boylan, well, I forget that guy's name. Like if you were to plan out every step of what you're gonna film, I don't know how many takes that would be. It would be more than one. I don't know how many takes that would be.
For me, it'd probably be close to like 100.
And I'm sure it is for most. And yeah, I mean, for it to look that great, yeah. If you could, because if someone could nail it every time on the first try, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah,
But yeah, so that's all I've got today. Just wanted
cool.
to share what we picked up down in North Carolina and share some thoughts about community and about
Yeah,
interacting in person. I think that it's a positive thing. I think that people should do more of that
I
when
think
and
so
where
too.
possible.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, there's a work event tomorrow, and originally I wasn't gonna go, but I think I am.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Changing your life for the more social.
Yep.
So that said, I do think that there are more meetups and more conventions that you and I are going to attend in the future. I'm going
Yep.
to definitely look at what types of events I can actually set up, you know, a booth at and say,
Yeah. That's
hey,
cool.
come visit. That way I feel like, saying, hey, come out to X hobby shop, there's not as much of a draw. But if I say, hey, meet me at GalaxyCon, obviously there's other attractions, but you
Yeah,
can come
that's
and say
true.
hi to me too. So that's a cool thing. And if you guys have any recommendations for like hobby shops that you want me to check out, this is one of the things that my wife was saying was like, maybe you should go and look at some of these places and scout them out for people. And I was like, that's actually a great idea because
Well, that's something we're gonna talk about on tomorrow's show. Is our local hobby shops, and are they
sweet.
any good? So
I'm glad that we can say, see, look at that. People don't appreciate how well you and I segue into each other's shows without planning it at all.
I know that works.
Just totally accidental. Well, sweet. No, I appreciate you sharing that sneak peek, and
Yeah.
thank you guys for hanging out with us and chatting. And hopefully, you had a fun time, watching me butcher this kit. And we will catch you guys tomorrow on the Gundam Explained show.
Yep. See y'all.
Cheers.